In this module, we're going to start to break down the different functions of communication. When we talk about function, we are talking about something's purpose. If you're wondering, why do we care about why? Here's why. Communication is multifunctional, and therefore it's quite complex. So breaking it down by function gives us a very systematic way to support an individual's communication needs. All right, so let's kick this episode off by discussing our most primal reason for communicating, which is to request. You may also hear the term "mand." A request is communicating to another person what it is we want or what we need, and then that other person mediates that request by essentially giving us what we're asking for. It seems like such a simple concept that we might not realize how difficult it can be to do it effectively, and also why it is so critical to be able to do so. So here's just a few reasons why this skill is so important. Now, first of all, being able to effectively express what is valuable to you can significantly improve the quality of life for everyone. Self-advocacy skills are crucial for independence, and the ability to make requests effectively can reduce or prevent having to resort to problematic behavior as a means to get that need met. I think about the last time that I was trying to communicate about something that was really important to me, and it felt like that other person was not understanding or listening. It was really frustrating. And learning to interact with others in a purposeful way also sets the stage for almost all learning. Most learning is social. You learn through interactions with other people. All right, so now we know why we need to teach it. So the question becomes, how do we teach it? If you recall from Module 1, we can break down any skill, including requesting, into 3 parts, A, B, and C. All right, so let's start with our analysis of Part B, the one we can easily observe. It's behavior. And in this case, it's the request itself. As we learned last time, the form of that response doesn't have to be vocal. So anything a person does can potentially be a request. All right, but here's where it gets a little tricky. What the person says or does, or how they say or do it, isn't what makes it a request. It's actually the context or what surrounds the behavior that gives it a function. You can look at any one of these examples here, and without knowing the context, you wouldn't be able to know why the person did it. Are they coughing to clear their throat, or are they politely trying to get someone else's attention? So to be effective, you need all 3, A, B, and C. So that means it's not just about getting your child to say or do something. We need to be equally concerned with what happens before and after the request. All right, so let's take a look back here at Part A. You're always going to have motivation. Something has to occur that's going to alter that momentary value of getting something or getting rid of something. To function as a request, they have to want it in the moment. Really important. All right, so the behavior, again, is specific to what is of value. In other words, what the person does specifies their motivation. All right, so just to note, when I use the word say, this is not limited to vocal speech. It is any form. From here on out, when I say, it's not vocal, not necessarily. All right, so consequently, you get what you want. You get what you've asked for. All right, so to put it in simple terms, a request is want it, say it, get it. A very basic example is you want a cookie, you say cookie, and you get a cookie. All right, but do know that requesting goes far beyond just asking for items, and it goes beyond the scope of this episode. This skill sequence chart is a really nice visual to help ensure that we are working on the right thing at the right time. And you can get a copy of this chart. It can be found on the resource collection pinned in the comments below. All right, now before we begin formally teaching your child to make requests, it's important to identify a starting point. We can't start where we think they should be or where we want them to be. We have to start where they are now. And oftentimes, the greatest step is that first step. So if your child has emerging requesting skills, or if it feels like you've been on a Stairmaster, the effort's there, but you're just not getting anywhere, then one technique you can use to try to get requesting started is by using something called a play-based routine. If you received any caregiver coaching during early intervention, you might already be familiar with this strategy, but you might not just know it as a different name. So you might have heard it being called a verbal routine or a social play chain. So it's the same thing. So the basic constructs of a play-based routine are that, number one, it's fun for your child, right? Motivation is a must. And that it also follows a predictable structure that is going to allow your child to anticipate the next step. So as this anticipation builds, you're going to interrupt that routine by inserting a pause. And that pause creates an opportunity for your child to do something to communicate that they want you to continue the routine. You might initially pause to look for eye contact, and then make a request with some assistance or some prompting, and then eventually to request on their own. So here's an example of a play-based routine.
Ready, set, go! Ready, set, go!
All right, so I do want to point out this was after multiple repetitions with no pause. And then I had inserted a pause here. I didn't get the desired response, but I continued the routine. And then when I went back and inserted the pause the next time, that led to eye contact and a vocal request. So you might have saw me pull the car faster and for longer, and I was making some vehicle sounds. And as a result of that request, things got a lot better for my child. All right, so play-based routines are a great way to get communication going, and they're also not limited to young children. So if you want to get some additional ideas on play-based routines or get some additional information, be sure to check out that resource collection at the end. So this strategy can help you take that first step, but you don't want to get stuck on this step. Eventually, you're going to need to move past play-based routines and move toward making requests in different contexts. So one way to get past that next step, or take that next step, as I should say, is by practicing where they're already successful and take small, consistent steps from there. So you can take specific requests that your child has learned in the classroom because that response has already been established. And this is also beneficial because it gives an opportunity for them to use it in a different environment and under slightly different circumstances. That practice doesn't just serve to maintain the responses they can already do, it also strengthens the skill in general, thus making it easier to learn new requests. All right, so let's say your child has learned to request Play-Doh. Here's what it could look like if you were practicing this request for Play-Doh at home. Now, first off, they have to want it. So you might have to get it out and play with it yourself, have siblings play with it, maybe get out some cookie cutters, just get creative and have fun with it. So when they want it, you are gonna wait for it. That means you're gonna pause and you are gonna wait for them to ask for it before they deliver it. Kind of similar to that video of the play-based routine. There was a pause and then the request was honored, right? You're gonna give the Play-Doh when they ask for the Play-Doh. All right, since this is something they know how to ask for, they shouldn't need assistance or prompting to say Play-Doh, but if for some reason that they do, you're just gonna add that prompt in there and no big deal, right? So when they ask for Play-Doh, you are gonna move it their way and say, meaning you're gonna immediately give it to them and you are gonna model that response. If you've ever been asked to complete a reinforcer survey or a preference assessment around what your child likes, chances are your child's teacher is using that to identify things that are reliably motivating and relevant for your child to learn. Your child learning to ask for their favorite things is a crucial first step, but remember, it doesn't stop there. So another way of identifying what your child is already requesting is to observe and write down the ways they communicate their wants and needs. Can they do this on their own, or do they require some assistance? And in what situations do they struggle to communicate their wants and needs? So here's just a sampling of some of the requests that my 7-year-old had made over the course of a few hours. If your child is making lots of requests, it can be a lot to capture. So you might just keep a tally and only focus on some areas. Maybe you notice that they can ask for anything that is right in front of them, but they can't ask for it when they want it, but it's not there. Maybe they can ask for the item, but they can't yet ask for actions around the item. So as you start to identify where your child needs support, here are some general tips to keep in mind. So you start out with picking just a few of your child's favorite things. So that can be foods, drinks, toys, but it could also be actions, activities, etc. And the key is you want to select things that are really valuable because nobody asks for things that they don't want. So focus on teaching a few requests at a time because, as with anything, it is harder to learn when there's too much to learn at once. And you're going to end up spreading those teaching opportunities too thin, and it's going to take longer to learn. So once you've have things identified, you want to set up so that they can't get these things on their own. So within sight, but out of reach, maybe. And this gives them a reason to request. It's going to require them to go through another person and do something. At first, maybe all they have to do is come to you to get it. Then, as long as they're not doing anything that you don't want them to be doing, right? Then you're able to model that response. And when you get your child doing this consistently, you can slightly increase the criteria. Keeping that response effort low doesn't mean that you are lowering the bar or that you have low expectations for your child. It simply means you're going to get to your destination faster if there's no unnecessary extra effort. So it's not going to feel like extra effort when it's done in small, systematic steps. So even before you require your child to request, you want to get in the habit of always modeling what you're eventually going to have them say. So it's best to pair a vocal model with a model of their response form if their response form is not vocal. So for example, if your child signs, you would want to vocally say, as well as sign, what you're giving them. So that said, it might be necessary to first teach all the potential communication partners so that everyone can help model and honor those requests. In general, the more models and the more the response results in getting what they're asking for, the faster they're going to learn it. Signasl.org is a nice free resource out there that makes learning signs super simple. So here is the American sign for a cookie. All right, remember, of course, you can always modify the sign to make it easier to produce. Just like vocalizations, signs get better with practice. So at first, start by taking any response that resembles the response you're looking for, just to continue and always model that desired response. So if your child is using a selection-based system, such as a picture exchange or a speech generating device, you obviously want to make sure that the responses are available, but also that the system itself is available. And this is one of the most overlooked aspects. So a lot of times, before you can begin teaching your child to request with the type of system, it's going to be necessary to teach them to carry the device and teach them to orient toward the device, as well as having a backup plan when it's not available. All right, so now once you have figured out what to teach, you also have to figure out what kind of prompt you are going to use to teach it. So you want to pick prompts that require the least amount of you want to pick the least amount of prompting that will assure the correct response. If your child knows the name of the item, the presence of the item or activity can serve as a little bit of a prompt. But if this is not enough to get that independent response, you can add in another level of prompting. So let's say you need to prompt Play-Doh. If your child is vocal and they can reliably repeat you, you can provide a verbal model of the word Play-Doh. And that's going to be called an echoic prompt. You can have your child respond by having them echo you. So you say Play-Doh and they say Play-Doh and you deliver the Play-Doh. So if that's not an option right now, then you're going to have to look at their other relative skills to decide how to prompt. So if they can imitate and they can copy what you do, that's going to probably be your best alternative option. You can show them a model of the response and then have them copy what you do. So if they were signing, I would show them the sign and then have them copy the sign. So signing Play-Doh, I sign Play-Doh, they copy the sign, I give the Play-Doh, and I model again. If you're using a selection-based system, then I'd show them how to get to the icon, and there's a little bit of delay there, but I'd have them copy what I did. Gesturing or pointing to the icon can also be another option. Now, if your child can't yet imitate, that's definitely a skill that you want to establish. But in the meantime, you can use physical guidance by helping them get their hands in the right spot and make the right movement. Just as with any prompt, you want to get rid of it as quickly as possible, but especially with physical guidance. All right, now we've taken a look at how we would go about teaching a basic request. Let's say my child can already ask for Play-Doh, but I always open it for them when I give it to them. So maybe this time I try to see what would they do if I gave it to them and it was unopened. What would they do? So they might try to unsuccessfully open it to themselves. And what I'm looking for is, do they indicate to me that they want it opened? The most clear way would probably be saying, signing, or selecting the word open. So that's the minimum response that I'm aiming to try to get. So if they're doing anything else, whether that be not saying anything at all when the motivation is there, or saying Play-Doh at this point, because they already have the Play-Doh, the motivation is really to get it open. And especially if my child responds in a problematic way, such as they cry or they hit or they flop to the floor, then I know this is going to be something that I need to teach at some point. All right, so here's what it would look like to teach it. First off, I'm only going to do this when there's motivation. So whether I capture that naturally occurring motivation or whether I set up an opportunity or situation to create motivation, maybe I get out the Play-Doh tools and they've asked for the Play-Doh now. So I've established a motivation. So I'm going to give them the container, and when I see them struggling to open it, I'm immediately going to prompt open. With the prompt, they'll say open, right? So then I immediately open it for them. And again, model that response, open. Here's your Play-Doh, let's play. So anytime I use a prompt, I'm going to try to get rid of that prompt. So this is what that could look like. So I'm going to provide another opportunity when the motivation is still high. But this time, if possible, I'm going to try to get that response to occur without the prompt or just with less of a prompt. So when that more independent response occurs, I'm not only going to open the Play-Doh, I'm going to open a bonus Play-Doh, like that, open the can that they saw and open the another can, right? Because I want to reward somehow better when a better response occurs. And again, modeling open. Right? It should not feel like work for you or your child. And it shouldn't look like making one request after another. Try to keep it fun. Intersperse opportunities to practice any mastered requesting skills. Incorporate opportunities to model requests that they might make in the future. They can't request items and actions that they don't know the names for, right? So, and we also wouldn't request things that we never experienced before and we don't even know we like. So a lot of times exposure and really can help to build these skills. So finally, we all learn best under conditions of motivation. So you might model different ways that they can interact with something and increase their engagement time, as well as build other important skills. You're able to provide a really rich context for the language that they're being exposed to. All right, so I'm not really done teaching until my child can consistently do it without any sort of prompting in any situation, right, where they need to use that response. So once I've taught, open with Play-Doh, the next time I might have a box and they know something exciting is inside, but they can't get it open themselves, and just some different situations. All right, so we've gone over how you would teach it. I'm going to leave you with a few more general tips. So first, you always want to teach more than one request at a time. You want to limit the amount that you teach at a time, but you always want to pick more than one at a time. And this is going to prevent them from learning that anytime I want anything, I'm just going to say or do this one response. So for instance, if I only teach cookie, they're not just going to say cookie when they want a cookie. they're likely to say cookie when they want juice, when they want their iPad, or just about anything else. The same goes for overly broad responses. So saying help is only helpful if they can then tell you what they need help with. So it's often best to teach specific actions, such as open, tie shoe, zip, before teaching the response help. So instead of more, you might focus on having them request what they actually want more of. All right, so some well-intended person actually taught my 2-year-old daughter to sign and say hungry. It's great, she can communicate to me because I don't have to rely on attending to some more subtle and non-specific cues. But here's why it is actually not so great, right? So she one day was going, "Mommy, hungry," and like rubbing her belly. And I was thinking, like, she just ate, but maybe she is still hungry. So I took her to the cupboard and I'm trying to offer just all these different things that I know she likes, but she is refusing everything I am offering. She's continuing to say, "Mommy, hungry." So I finally realized, she actually is not hungry at all. She wanted a drink. And although she can specifically request milk, water, and juice, she said hungry so often that it became her like go-to response. So on that note, in general, you want to pick specific requests rather than broad or what we call generalized requests. It can really prevent a lot of potential problems that could arise. All right, so if your child is making a few one-word requests, the next logical step isn't to have them requesting in full sentences. The next step is actually, let's expand the number of one-word requests that they can make and make sure they're doing so across different settings, so different people, places, and examples. So if the time is right and you're now working on building more words, you might start with 2 words, right? And you want to make sure that those added words add a purpose, so they still have a purpose. Otherwise, you are going to just get stuck on that step. So for example, if your child learned to say cookie when they want a cookie, if you now require them to say more cookie, it adds a word, but it doesn't actually add any meaning. So saying more cookie is going to result in the same thing as if I just said cookie. I want this to be functional, so the word has to result in getting something better. So I could present a chocolate chip cookie and a sugar cookie. So those additional words then give my child a way to specify which one it is that they want. So yes, I did want to say, technically, chocolate chip cookie is, chocolate chip itself is 2 words, but it's considered 1 word in the sense that it conveys 1 unit of meaning. And I wanted to throw that out there because sometimes we get so caught up on the number of words that our child uses that we end up forgetting about function. And remember the critical importance of this function. All right, so thank you for tuning into this episode. Reminder to check out that resource collection for all of the resources from this series and more. And don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on those notifications so you won't miss the next episode, Request Malfunction. What to do when requesting errors occur, including when the request is in the form of challenging behavior. See you next time.